try this one? Do we need it?
Not, I can move it like this. I don't need this. What? It's not so many people.
Yeah. All right, we're about ready to start. So if you just take your seats or grab some more paper boxes if you don't have a seat yet. Right, welcome to Eco for Climate, organized by GreenBuzz, Anna mainly. And we're very glad that you made it despite the weather. Apparently it was a bit difficult for many people to come here tonight. Anyways, yeah, so we'll have a great program tonight. We'll start with the panel discussion. And then we have, I guess, only 5 people pitching their projects, because one kind of got stuck in a plane. So yeah, that's a bit unfortunate, but yeah, so then we have 5 great presentations, and then we'll choose the Ecopreneur Berlin 2017.
Yeah, they're really.
Right, great. So, well, this is our 42nd event, actually, as GreenBuzz. And we kind of used to ask who has been at an event of us before. Raise your hands, please. All right, that's about a third, maybe. Lots of new faces then, that's great. Cool, so yeah, welcome. And again, thanks for coming. You see, like, Twitter, if you want to Twitter or something or find more information, that stuff's just there in front. And yeah, then I don't have anything else to say. I'll just hand over to Anna for an introduction. Thank you.
So, thanks everyone again for coming here, and I'm going to explain you a bit about what is Eco for the Climate. It's the second time we're doing it in Berlin, and also thanks to all our sponsors and partners that you can see all of them there. In case you have any question. And then, yeah, I want to explain you what is the Global Week. And then, as Marco said, then we have the agenda, then the panel discussion, and then the awards. So the Global Week is taking part worldwide, and is trying just to promote and connect ecopreneurs, but also like to implement the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. And it's happening since 2014. At the beginning it was only 7 cities and 4 countries. Last year, when we joined them, it was like 22 cities and 16 countries. And also the winner went to Marrakesh. And this year, it's like 39 cities. Yesterday was the first one in Mallorca. We are really trying to create a global network of climate innovation labs. Talk about that later, because we don't really have a lot of time. And they also have a platform. The address of the platform is there, and then also at the end of the presentation, just log in, check, and there's going to be like events there, like again, like worldwide, all over the year. Now we're going to have like the expert panel, then a bit of networking as usual, and then our climate champion award, then jury time, and also some like 1-minute pitches. And then at the end, we're going just to tell you who is the winner from this year. The panel discussion, like, now it changed a bit because of the weather, people getting sick, but everyone is here. So they're going to talk about how can small companies tackle big climate problems. The moderator is going to be Uli. She's from GreenBuzz. Unfortunately, the moderator was sick. So, yeah, she will explain you a bit more about this in 2 minutes. And then we have 5 climate champion awards. We had 6, but as Marco said, one couldn't make it. They would be like making also like a pizza kucha, bits, and then the jury will decide about who is the best one. They will get the chance, the winner, to go to the COP23 that this year is in Bonn. And yeah, just for you to remember, we have more events, we can talk about this later, after the panel discussion and the climate award. And now I will just introduce you to Uli and the panelists.
We have so many very good discussants here, panelists. And I think the easiest thing is that I just hand you around the microphone and let you introduce yourself for around 1 minute. And it would be great if you could focus a little bit how you actually contribute to tackling climate change issues. I'll start with you and then end the mic round.
Hello, my name is Maximiliana. I'm working at Sonnen. I don't know if you know Sonnen. It's a residential battery producer. Pretty well known within Germany because they are like one of the largest growing tech companies in Germany. And now they're producing in the USA, selling in Australia, UK, Italy, mainly Germany. And in Germany, they're combining the battery with energy services. So they're now offering services to individuals to use their flexibility and make use of being part in the energy system. Sonnen is working on the idea of having clean and affordable energy for everyone. So I think they're quite a pioneer within the German energy arena.
Hey, I'm George Kressler, and I started with the Young Greens several years ago because I wanted to do something about climate change, and I went to Ende Gelände and we were blockading open pit mines in Germany, and it was all about climate action. And last year, somehow I ended up being elected to the Berlin Parliament for the Greens, and now I'm in there for a year. I'm the spokesperson for climate and environment, and I wanted to start the climate and bicycle revolution in Berlin, and somehow after 1 year I say politics is so much slower, so I'm really looking forward to the pitches today to see if it's faster in Star Wars.
But I like your initiative.
Good evening, I hope you can hear me okay. My name is Yvonne Lopo-Salva. I'm an environmental engineer from Guatemala. And here in Berlin, I work for TMG, Think Tank for Sustainability. And this is a think tank consultancy that we have formed together and are building up with several people. And some of them are a former environment minister of Germany, who is also executive director of the UN Environment Program, and also a member of the current Council for Sustainable Development that advises Chancellor Merkel and the German government. So you could say that what we do as a think tank and consultancy is to do research projects that aim to support policy making and also to implement climate change activities on the ground. But if you probably look at the median age of our 3 directors, which is 75 and up, you could probably say that we're the oldest startup in Berlin at this point. But what we want to focus on, or what I like to focus on, and I hope that I see some of that in the pitches tonight, is the idea that we need to transform our food system. And that is a major question for me in tackling climate change. The way that we conduct and we do agriculture, which is the largest emitter of greenhouse gases globally, but at the same time the largest employer of people, and the way that we decide which food is produced, who eats it, who benefits from this food, and then all the impacts that that has in the people living across the world and in our climate is something that I'm very interested in. In the case of a city like Berlin, the topic of food waste is something that we focus very much on as a major topic to tackle once we consider that if you took food waste as one of the countries, it would be the third largest country in the world in terms of its emissions. So that's something of the things that I want to see here tonight.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Christian, and I'm an independent consultant supporting startups in the field of clean tech and energy in many different roles, actually. So first of all, I'm a member of a few accelerator programs that usually help startups in getting funding, also in improving the business model, or to work together with corporates. And in that role, I also work for energy. For energy, I'm scouting startups that we potentially can invest in. I think investing in startups is a very efficient way in order to grow startups and make innovations getting bigger, and thereby also helping to protect the climate. And I'm really looking forward to see the pitches of the startups tonight.
Thank you very much. So maybe you've seen that we tried to select a lot of different actors from the sustainability field. So we have the successful startup that have already made it, basically. Then we have a political party sitting here as well. We have an institute which does environmental research and really focuses on these points. And then we have an accelerator that really tries to foster and help startups in order to get there where we want. In general, everybody here is basically working for the same goal. So we all want to tackle climate change issues. So usually we always try to make panel discussions a bit more controversial, and I've already told everybody of you. Try to not be too nice to each other and try to point out a couple of challenges that you have also maybe with each other, right? Because like startups might have problems with regulations or politics, and institutes are kind of like really trying to find their way in how you can actually change things. So there might be some problems between these actors still. How it works now, usually we thought that we're going to do an hour of panel discussion. Since we started this so late, we're probably going to do it a little less. In the end, I'm going to open up the panel for a 5 to 10 minutes discussion with you, so you can ask some questions. So please prepare that if you have any. And that leads me well over to my next point, which is problems. So I want to ask you, what challenges do you face in your work? So if you want to try to help the climate, what do you see, which actors, which regulations, which situation on the journey, but also maybe over that, do you have to tackle? Maybe I start with you and go the other way back.
Yeah, that's a really good question. In my daily life, actually, I have the most challenges with colleagues from my corporate client, Energy, because to be honest, they all have systems running for years, and to convince them that they need to do something different now, which is actually a lot of more work than before, that's a really tough challenge, actually. So very often it's more easy to have the innovation happening on the outside and then bring it in later when it's already mature. Also, I see lots of problems actually in the regulation area, because, for example, in the energy sector, I'm really missing substantial innovation right now. And one of the main reasons is that companies in that highly regulated market cannot find a fitting business model, because the current roles are taken over by the huge utilities, and I really would wish that we have there a more proactive regulation that enables young and small companies to actually enter this energy market. And to me, there is, especially when it goes to sustainability, there is not a technology that is not working. There is only, in my eyes, a business model that is not working. And a business model in our areas is always based on the right regulative framework. And therefore, I can only engage the politics to improve those frameworks in order to help young companies.
Maybe to make it a bit more lively as well, we don't have to go with an order, but if you want to respond to that straight away,
yes,
you can also
please.
just it makes more sense in the discussion. Right, I think.
Okay. Thanks for the challenging intro. Well, obviously on the energy market, there are a lot of small actors very in the front run a role, and the big utilities have to run behind. Nevertheless, I think it's not just about constructing a business case, because if we talk about waste of resources, of climate change, it's not that we just adjust the market and then we have a win-win situation, everything gets clean. I strongly believe that there will be losers, and the question is if those losers will be the poor people of the south, or the people who have not enough money and live on the outskirts of Berlin, or whether we distribute the burden somehow fairly. So yes, there is a business case, we can adjust the business case that more sort of innovative, good startups and company can get a good business case and work towards the common goal, but there will be losers as well. We shall never forget about that. And I actually think that RWE, which is like the mother of energy, will be one of the losers.
I just want to ask this question. Thanks for giving me an answer. Maybe then we can go over to a startup that wants to revolutionize a little bit our energy landscape.
Well, I can take two roles, the one of the startup and the one of myself. Before taking the position of the startup, I remember myself deciding to go into an institution and to go, before I worked for the startup, I worked to an RV compared corporate. And the reason was, when I was about 20 years old, I was looking at people like you guys, and I was wondering why no one is really taking over responsibility in those institutions, which we all criticize. Because if we don't go into the system, we can't change the system. And the issue I'm having right now with all those startups, there are a lot of brilliant ideas, but let's be frank, one of the reasons they all startup, it's much more easy to get money for projects when you right now you're a startup instead of within a corporation, because it's much more difficult to get money. So this is one of the drivers why there are so many startups right now. And I would love to see all of you guys with that mindset, I suppose you have, that's the reason why you're here this evening, to take over responsibility within politics, within corporates, within those institutions that have power. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges of our generation, that if we want to change the system and if we want to promote initiatives that are pro-climate, like look at the US, it's so necessary and we are doing that, then we have to like sort of, in Germany you would say, do the Packen mit dem Teufel. But that's the only way to actually change the system, from my opinion. So now, talking for Sonne, of course, it's pretty much the same. As Christian said, the regulation is, it's so yesterday that you can basically not deal with it. The German energy system, that's the only one I can talk about in detail, was built on the idea that everything is centralized. And with the renewables, you need to have decentralized technology, business models, regulation, like anything has to be decentralized, but the people deciding don't have the mindset and not lack the understanding for what is actually needed. So anything connected to regulation, it's just a major issue. So again, I'm with you. And I think RWE is understanding that. So I wouldn't say they're necessarily a company that will be part of the losers. I think there's some potential.
I just wanted to add to the regulation part, I forgot that earlier. The energy regulation in Germany is so complicated that within political parties, party groups in the parliament, and even in the ministries, there are just a handful of people who can understand it. And there are startups around single individuals who are just smart enough to understand one of the details, and then they can create a business case. It's so complicated that politics cannot keep up. So we cannot just, we have to somehow simplify the whole regulation. Maybe that's the point where we can get together, because we just cannot comprehend it anymore. Not more regulated.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting topic that you raised already. And for an institute, it's always like being a bit of the leading instrument maybe to change it as well. Although for an institute, I always find it hard to actually have an impact. So what's the challenge that you face in your work?
Well, I hear there the controversy. Well, first of all, congratulations, because if you want us to disagree with each other, putting us in such a cold room here, so that's a good first step. But also secondly, that I think that this is probably my favorite question, because working in research, one of the things that we like the most is to tell everybody else what they're doing wrong. And that, of course, does not win us very much in very many friends when we want to reach out and convince people to do things differently. But one thing that I do find that is necessary, and going back to the topic of regulation and laws, be it as it may, Germany having such a complex policy for energy, it's still an example when you start to look at it from the global perspective, and that's something that we need to do a lot in terms of our work when we want to promote a project or any type of solution, recommendation for policy making that also involves other countries and other governments getting involved. Germany still has an example that provides very clear guiding posts in terms of investment, in terms of how how much money basically the German government has put into the energy transition to make it happen over the past 30 years. So that's something that still has a certain value. Of course, one challenge that we face, or let's say the three main challenges that we have in our projects are, one, to find a type of financing for these type of activities. So a lot of the times, even though we're the oldest startup in Berlin, we don't get a lot of startup capital to implement our projects. So we actually do have to go to government and ask the ministries for public funds to implement projects that come with a hell of a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of very slow steps until you can actually implement the activities that you're planning. Which is fair enough, because you need to also be able to prove that you have used public money in a proper way. But that also leads to this belief that a lot of our projects don't have a lot of impact. The thing is that if you do want to have an impact in the long term, you do have to carry all of the population and all of the interest actors with you from the beginning. So in terms of research, we can't really go somewhere and say, we have this solution and you implement that this is the new technology for climate change. But in the approach that we take, we really do want to go to the ground and get farmers involved, get policymakers at the local level involved, get German policymakers to realize that the activities that are being implemented here in Germany have a clear impact in resources in other parts of the world, and only through setting up that process do we come to solutions that people do want to use. And that's probably a difference from the startup approach. And I see already some responses.
And then another slide. I was just wondering, your or what you've seen within energy, which startups actually did a good job in financing? So what would be like the key success factors for a startup to win in this run?
What do you mean exactly successful? Which require like a lot of funding, or that would be actually your company, because you have been successful.
Yeah, okay, but certainly is an interesting case, because they actually did a good job in fundraising. The guy who is responsible for that is like above 40 years old. He has a good network. And then they have a business running, which is not so startup-like. It's the production of hardware. So with this money now, they can actually find business models within the decentralized energy system. That's their way of having success. But I think now we have 1 year or 2 years energy. Which one is it? Like 1 year, more or less. Like looking back, give us insight on the startup stand. Where within does this accelerator, which ones did a good job? Are there any?
That's really a good question, because there's, in my eyes, not so many good examples there. We will see very soon a huge investment in a solar company, actually again, but it's actually a company only that is bringing, let's say, PV to the people in a different channel than it has been before. But there again, I can say, for me, solar power or PV power is the best example for making the business model fit, because solar power was so expensive in the past, and then the regulation jumped in. They provided a good model to support that technology, and that made it so cheap at the end that we now have this energy transition actually happening. And we wouldn't be here today without that right regulation framework that would that enabled the business model at the end.
I want to extend a little bit the point, and just going a little bit into the next topic I want to talk about as well. Actually, kind of fits that as well. And you know, an initiative or a startup or your own party, maybe like whatever you are doing, have you seen anybody else on an individual base or an organizational base? That actually is like a really good example of how to put through actions that help climate. Maybe starting from that, because you were saying like startups, yes, but not so many soon.
Actually, want to.
But you can also do that.
The regulation, when you refer to the renewable energy feed-in tariffs, which of course was a wonderful regulation, but what we were doing was we saying, okay, we need wind energy, we need PV, and we just give you money, and it's getting cheap and nice, but we pay for it anyhow. Now, me as a green, I really like that, but a lot of people didn't like it. And it is quite expensive. We cannot do it for any technology, especially not if we don't know where the technology leads. With PV, we knew that's the technology we want to have. You just drive down the costs. We We don't know that with storage because there are different ways to store energy. So that's why we don't have a renewable feed-in tariff law for storage. Which I would like to have that, but which is, we don't have the majority for that in Germany. Anyhow, I just want to add on that. You were asking for a startup which I somehow find inspiring.
A startup, an initiative, an individual person, a political campaign, anything that you would say has really contributed to climate change positively, and that was like a really good example that just made it for
last year I was visiting a guy who was called Thomas Gottschalk. Now the Germans know that guy, but it was a different guy. He looked the same, and he had a startup called Mobiso. Some have heard of it. And what he was saying was, well, I bring small PV panels to Africa, and the problem is now, how do people in an African village which don't have electricity pay for it? Now everybody here and in Africa has a cell phone, and they do a lot of paying with cell phone, and you can actually pay the rate through your cell phone. Brilliant idea, and they're scaling up to, I don't know, 1 million PV panels by 2020. They have a huge scale-up rate. And this is an idea, we were sitting there as Greens, and we said, why didn't we came up with it? I would have done it as well. And he's getting money from the UN and from the federal ministry. And I think this is really the idea, because it's a decentralized way of producing energy in Africa. It's just brilliant.
And I think like for this solution, I know as well, I think not only you can pay like prepaid or whatever from your phone, but also other people can contribute to paying for your PV and support you. I'm not sure, but anyways, like this will also take a community into town, so you take like everybody in a shared model or like a microfinance approach to actually realize how that. Yeah, that's very interesting. Do you have any other like political or startups or solutions?
Solutions, yeah. Well, solutions, that's quite tricky. It depends. It's the question of whether, and I guess we'll get to that also in the panel discussion, of where do you have the most impact. You can have a million brilliant smaller ideas, but then one question that has come up a lot in my field is, where do we get the broadest or the biggest advance in terms of fighting climate change the fastest? And this is a huge, huge issue also for policymaking. In our field, carbon sequestration has been, of course, very important because we work a lot with natural resource management. How do we use our resources? Where do we store all of the carbon, all of the pollution that is out there? For that, I found it really inspiring to visit, for example, Wangari Maathai's park in Nairobi, in Kenya, and her Billion Tree Initiative, because this is really a community-led, very, very powerful, very inspiring woman dedicating her life to making sure that people care about these issues that go well beyond climate change, but also the right to land, the right to have food, the right to be able to sustain yourself and your families. And that park is, of course, quite an interesting initiative that gives you a lot of thoughts about how promising community action can be that doesn't come without challenges, for example. Another example that is really good in this regard and bad at the same time, and I like it because it really shows where we could do more. And this is the example of a farmer, actually, from Burkina Faso, who is an illiterate farmer and has worked over 25 years just restoring soil and very simple techniques just to make agriculture more sustainable. And he has done more for the Sahel area than any other scientist, national or international, in the entire region. And of course, after over 20 years of restoring this land with very, very basic, traditional, indigenous techniques, completely changed the ecosystem that was not producing anything anymore into a productive, helpful way to sequester carbon and fight climate change. And of course, as soon as this land is being more productive and is giving out more, then larger corporations started to get interested in the land that he was working on. And since he doesn't have really secure rights to the land, then it becomes a challenge. What kind of initiatives are promising and are good if you don't also think of the impacts that they have in terms of social aspects and economic aspects for local communities? One, of course, that I like a lot is because it's fun, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio's foundation is putting a lot of good things into the cause. But at the same time, in terms of policies, I found it very inspiring what the governors at the more decentralized level in the US and how they responded to the decision by the president to pull out of the climate agreement, and how like that type of initiative to prove that we don't have to always act from the president's level, but really as a community and through concrete actions, and that's something that I find really inspiring.
Yeah, maybe short comment as well, and then we're going to open questions to the build-up.
Yeah, so in terms of initiatives, I think we have kicked off together with the German Energy Agency last year. There is Leo actually from Vienna here today, a really great initiative. It's a Startup Energy Transition Award. It's the first global startup award trying to discover the most innovative technologies in order to promote the energy transition on a global scale and make them accessible to the whole world. And there we actually have seen that we have much more interesting startups actually, or innovatives happening in other countries right now than in Germany, I really have to say. They are much faster right now than we are. And for example, we had a startup there from India that was my absolutely favorite. They have developed a thermal storage technology that enables to get the whole cooling trucks to get rid of in order to cool the truck. And what they have developed a thermal storage that can be charged by solar power, and it runs up to 12 hours to cool the whole truck without any additional energy. And that for me was a really great example of how innovation can work. It's even much cheaper than having it with the diesel gensets, and thereby they have been able to roll it out on a great scale in India already within a very short time.
Funny, I was actually like judging the startups before as well in the first round, like the unofficial round, and I liked them. I had them, and I thought like, yeah, that's the best. I think that was fine. Okay, like to come a little bit, you already mentioned it. Should it be climate change? Should it be top bottom or bottom up? So is actually going to change our system? And also, one of the two questions that we always, like I'm always having on my mind, and I didn't really talk about it too much. So why don't we have a carbon price that actually works? And why don't we substitute things like fossil fuels, like diesel, like whatever? Why is it still happening? Is it regulation? Is it lobbyists? I don't, like, this is a discussion we could do like for 3 hours, I guess. But maybe you want to elaborate on either of the points, bottom up or top down, or CO2 prices, CO2 tax, or why are we still having so much like funding on things that are not leading towards the right climate initiatives?
If you don't mind, I'll respond to the question you had before first. Because I think, I also want to connect it to one, I think one of, or at least to me, in my memory, the protesters against nuclear waste had like the biggest impact on, or pro-climate change, or climate change, at least to my mindset. And at least if you're German, I guess to everyone's mindset. So this is bottom up, and I think if you don't manage to market your idea and your project, no matter how interesting it is, and if it's a good evening story, you're not gonna scale if you can't connect with everyone. So this regulations, and of course there's gonna be a price for carbon, whatever. I don't think this is the key to success. If it's a means of financing ideas, yes. However, the strongest idea is to connect with people. This is the way to have a long-term impact. And this is like your party, the party you're representing, to me, has sort of had a bigger impact on the German culture than you could have had if you have a chancellor for 4 years, because you changed the mindset of an entire generation. So definitely it's bottom up.
I think it's right, you need to have a challenger, let's say, from bottom up, but then again, I think you can support that by top down, by providing the right regulative framework.
Yeah. Okay. Well, trying to think of this question now, it's really difficult for me to follow up the line of thinking of whether bottom up or top down. Because I tend not to think like that. I tend to think like this. And this is what I was getting at with the food systems point that I was trying to make at the beginning, in terms of you need all of them. You need both. And that's one big problem that I have with every single sector saying, we are the ones that have the solution. And if you trust private sector, then we will get it there. If you trust politicians, we will make it happen. it doesn't happen on its own, and it doesn't happen in a separate way. And it's always connected to the causes that lead us to climate change, but also how we can change what we're doing to cause it, and how we can prepare people to be more resilient and to be not so affected when the impacts of climate change show up. And that's a big thing in terms of the balancing act between mitigation and adaptation and what kind of activities you want to support. But just one thing that we need to consider right now, okay, maybe bottom up is the way to go. If you think about the main problem that we have right now in terms of climate change, food crisis, what's happening in South Sudan, what's happening in Yemen, what's happening in Syria, all the numbers that we have had across the decades now had indicated that we were going down in the number of how many people are hungry out there. These numbers this year, for the first time, has gone back up. And this is really, really concerning, because that means that all of these efforts that we've been trying to put together from the top-down approach, global policies, are obviously not working. All of the scientists, all of the ideas, all of the technologies is not working. So then what is happening? What are the causes for so many people still being hungry, and now that number going more up? As of course, one of them is climate change, but the second one is conflict. So to think that only with technologies, only with policy, only with some sort of new great idea we're going to solve this problem, that's where I have a problem. Because if you think about the connection, climate change is completely linked to conflicts, completely linked to how hungry people are, to how much access they have to resources or not, then it's really tricky to pick one of the two. But we really need a systems approach to the issue.
I'm thinking about going more into the system approach, but system change and climate change was always our slogan. But I wanted to come back to you and regulation. Now, I just had budget negotiations today, and we were in agreement within the coalition what we wanted to do. More money for climate action, for circular economy, and it was like a nice round, but our conflict was how much money we spent in the first year and the second year, and so it was not about the goal, but how fast do we approach it. And people were telling me all the time, now we can do it, but people are just not ready. We cannot build bicycle lanes everywhere in the first year. Or we cannot put in like 15...
I would love you for that.
I would love you for that. Or 50 million for circular economy projects. We don't know where to spend the money. It's just too small. And these are the moments. Just this afternoon, I'm sitting there and I'm hoping for startups to just overtake policy and say, no, we can do it actually. We can be faster and lead somehow, because politics, or some actors in politics, are just too slow because they have other people in mind who are more skeptical. I'm sitting around here with you, obviously interested in being a little bit more active, but there are so many other people out there. And just to add up on that, I'm hoping for startups to overtake politics. And last year when we were talking to Mobisol, we were asking them, okay, what do you want? You have a nice idea. What can we do for you? Do you need money? Do you need funding? Do you need other regulations? We want you to sell even more PV panels. And he said, well, actually, leave me alone. I have my business case. If I have one wish, please, I need a bicycle line here on Scarletzer Street. So what I trying to say is, tell us what you need. Is it just money? Is it different regulation within the energy sector? Startups or bigger corporations come all the time, and it's really complicated. But what about circular economy? What do you need? How do we scale that up? I have no idea. I'm sitting there on a pile of money, and I don't know what to do with it, because I don't know how to help the whole issue. So talk to us.
That's exactly the last topic basically I want to lead over to, before opening up the questions for the audience as well. And one thing I want to say before is really like, I know that a lot of young people that think that sustainability is great and want to work in this way, they're thinking like we should go to the innovative startups, we should do something else, we should do something different, but I believe it's really important that everybody also goes to the old players, because we need also change from within basically. So we need people working for politics, we need people working for corporations that really want to change the system from within, because from the outside I think it's not only going to work. So for all of you as well, like it's not too bad to go to cooperation if you try to keep your own values, maybe a little bit. My personal opinion. Anyways, yeah, but leading over to the point is exactly what do you need? Like what do you need? What do the startups need that we're going to hear? soon, but what do you need from each other? Since we have a lot of different parties sitting around here, can you think of anything that you want from politics, from maybe also an institute that really defines a lot of strategies as well, from an accelerator, from a startup? What do you need from each other?
You can't hide. Like, your politics, you have to take responsibility for the regulation. If not you, who else? So actually, I think you have to get down to the nitty-gritty details and resolve the issues you're having.
Any other thing you need?
I think what we also need is actually people who actually want to change something and not just talk about stuff. Because whether you want to change something from the outside or within a corporation or within a new project, it always means like really a lot of work. If you start a startup, for example, it's a lot of work, and we actually need people who are willing to take that challenge and to go that way and really change something. Like, change always means a lot of work. And I just want to encourage everyone to actually go for that way. And I think the times for actually founders have never been easier. Yeah, you can go to the politicians; they have lots of money to give you. We have many other people in the city which have money to give you in order to help you to found a startup and actually to grow it. And I think the times have never been better for that kind of innovation.
The times have never been better. Let's make climate change great again. It's
discuss on that.
It's just really it's tricky because especially working in research, it's complicated to sometimes see how far we have gotten. So it's really easy for us to say, okay, this is so complicated right now. The problems are getting bigger and bigger. We're seeing all of these issues with democracy, with far-right parties rising up in countries where we wouldn't even imagine that was possible again. So it's sometimes it's good, and that's what I would say actually that I need, or that we need as consultancies, as think tanks, as research actors, is the opportunity to have spaces for discussion like this. You have no idea how many conferences we attend or organize ourselves. Probably one of them will be the climate conference that you were talking about at the beginning, and where so many people sit there, and if I have to hear one more time one of the speakers say, we need to involve the private sector, and why are they not here? And this is really one of the most repeated sentences you would not believe. And this is supposedly where all of the experts are sitting down, all of the politicians or the decision makers that are trying to change things at different scales. And to have then these type of lacking interventions, or let's say lacking participation by private sector, it's either not true or we're just not looking for the right spaces for engage that type of motivation. So that's probably what I would need, is to have more opportunities to discuss with the fellow panelists to see what we can do together. How do we engage your knowledge and your solutions in research to make it happen? And of course, policy making, this is something that we do all of the time. All of the work that we do with research is to try to provide more socially acceptable strategies and solutions for better policy making in a way that supports not only Germany getting faster to climate goals, but also for Germany and other countries to realize that consumption, production, decisions that everybody of us here make when we go to the supermarket, when we choose a car over a bicycle, that they have an impact in Brazil, in Indonesia, in Africa. And that type of thing is what I would need, is to have more of a space to talk about these systems.
Yeah, it's a bit of what we're trying to do as GreenBuzz as well. First of all, to connect the people so they can talk to each other and know what they want and what they need. And secondly, also the other point is to make individuals feel again that they actually have an impact, like to empower whoever is possible to empower. I think that's a good way. Do you want to add anything to that? Otherwise, I'm going to open the space for the audience for questions.
I want to get to know startups.
You want to get to know? Okay, we hurry up. We'll take a few questions. Maybe Michael can hand around one microphone, and then thank you.
Questions.
And yeah, say who you're addressing, or if you're addressing everybody. And maybe who you are, very quickly.
Okay, hi, and thank you for the interesting panel discussion. My name is Joanna. I'll pitch in a couple of minutes. I'm a bit nervous. But the question is for everyone, and maybe it's unrelated, but it was just one of the biggest questions that I have in terms of climate change. The things that caused climate change have been at some point solutions. So, I don't know, let's say plastic, you know, it's now all over the oceans, but at some point it was a solution. So my question for you is, how do we make sure that the solutions that we find today are not going to become the problems tomorrow? Meaning for the future generations, because we need to think about them. The microphone in the middle.
Well, there are a lot of examples. For example, if you take CCS, carbon storage, which I think will be a huge problem in the future, but for some corporations it's a solution today. And this is where we need science and a civil society, which is critical, because if you just look at the business case, today's solutions can look so sexy and so good, despite having negative consequences in the future. So again, you need a good business case, but not only, you need science and a civil society.
I think we need to be also humble. That's one of the bigger problems that we have had with so many solutions, is that they have been promoted to a certain point and supported by so many big names and big companies and also governments, that it gets to a point where it's too difficult to say, okay, we made a mistake. Sorry, let's just take it all back and try it again. And that is where it's really important, why Georg is saying that we really have timely discussions about the impacts, and that we accept that a solution is not a solution forever from the beginning. You try it out, but you always have to keep talking and keep researching, keep looking at what the potential impacts might be, and be prepared to see it as a learning process, to change the solution, to pull it back, to pull it out completely, and think of something new. And that's something that we can also see ourselves as consumers. That doesn't necessarily mean that we see a product that has soya in it and it's completely different, and then we're not eating meat, and at the same time not think about the impacts that all of that soya has in terms of what is being produced somewhere in a tiny municipality in Brazil. So also for ourselves to think about things that we have thought to be so good, and be prepared to maybe adapt again our choices and our behavior is also very important, and it's also very much connected to being humble about these things.
Thanks. Do you want to?
Yeah, I was wondering if it's due to being humble, but your party is hesitant to support storage systems, because like years ago supporting PV, and then not only all the German parties sort of were stepping back from it again, because they're like, oh my god, it's getting way too expensive, and are we sort of supporting the wrong people behind it? And then supporting biofuel or biogas, and then suddenly there was this conflict with the agriculture. So maybe a lot of political parties are now sort of hesitant taking position, because they don't know about the effects it's going to have in like 5 years from now, due to this history of stepping back again. Might this be?
Why we are hesitant.
Yeah, short story.
Shall we take 2-3 more questions with short answers?
I'm not sure if mine is short. When you're talking about people that getting a grassroots campaign, lots of people involved, all the general public, Facebook and social media, all that shit, and then getting them to get support for an event. But then how do you turn that into, if you get millions of people who are supporting a particular project, how do you then get that turned into policy or government legislation? Because we all know that there's a huge difference between what the people want and what the governments do and what the corporations do. If we can get loads of support, which is possible, how does that then turn into anything that can actually do something? Because that's a problem I have with all my projects. We can get loads of support, we can get loads of people involved, we can do all the right things, but then nothing really happens.
Can you name some of the projects?
Hmm?
Can you name the projects where you had a lot of support?
I can name lots of projects. I mean, look at air quality in London, for example. or Occupy movement, or anyone, anybody, any project that is got so much support from a people point of view. I mean, look at anything in the news at the moment, like gun legislation in America, anything. Nothing gets turned into policy. I want to know, how do you bridge that gap between the millions of people wanting something, plastic bags, air quality, water, plastic, and getting the government to listen, or policy to change?
Nobody's fighting over the microphone on that one. But I would have to say that there's also many different examples of something else. Look at homosexual marriage. And there's... Of course. But if you... Yeah.
PV, look at Spain. They were
Yes.
number one in the world.
Yes.
And everyone wanted to do it, and then government did not give subsidiaries.
Exactly.
We've had this in England constantly, nuclear, everything.
Exactly, but then you see, yeah, and that is explained by so many different factors, and I think that we had the example here before from the protesting against nuclear energy in Germany. So there are several examples. But in that case, there was a different outcome. Or there's also, let's say, even smaller initiatives where countries have completely eliminated plastic, which was the other example. So it's one...
Sorry, I don't want to, like, maybe you just answer. I think it's easier to do, like, the discussion thing later on in networking, and then we just do question, answer now, and then one more question, because I think we all want to see the startups, and it's a little bit cool.
So, yeah, I agree, but there's also examples on the other side. You have to have also the answer. So when you go to Georg and you tell him, I need a policy that supports these idea or these problem that we have, then he'll ask you, of course, okay, but then what do you want me to do about it? What is the policy that goes with it? And then let's have a conversation about what the solution is, what the policy instrument for it is, where the funding is going to come, and what is the contribution by different actors, by not only science, but also by businesses. And it doesn't happen always, because some of these issues are just so intrinsic to the way our system is built that, of course, having your... Of course. Okay, but then to not make it a debate, I guess that my answer would always be that is never a reason to give up. If that would be the thing, you can never say that nothing ever happens, because our world looks so different now than it did 100 years before. And different things work for different topics, and a lot of the times it's just a lot of aspects coming together, but I think that that's probably better bilaterally.
He was raising his hands very patiently the whole time, so maybe you can take his question.
Yeah, hello everybody. What I would be interested to learn a little bit more, how do we tackle like the human desires and the human needs of the entire society more? And I had the feeling that during some parts of the discussion we were really like up in the sky in some political fairs, and I would like to see how can we help and how can we make it more tangible for the 80 million people in Germany or the 7 million people in the world that climate change is actually important, and that they get something like small, tangible they can do and not only like having this cheap talking, but they have like something more user-centric to this climate change. Is there any idea around?
Basically, this is what Sonnen is doing. It is like start at your home, try to produce enough energy for yourself and then for the community. So they are focusing on energy production, and they have a business model or quite an attractive offer to homeowners and to provide energy for themselves. So this is like a single thing. I think this is a solution where you can actually get an offer and you can buy something and you can do it and you can invest. Same thing would be for every single issue you tackle. It's a very broad question you're posing. So if you have a concrete idea, like if you have a concrete question, we can actually give you an answer. And this is what startups are doing, and this is what business ideas are doing. So they tackle single questions and provide a solution. This is why I decided to be in a startup and not within politics, because then I can actually focus on concrete ideas and not the general issues. And this is maybe what the startups in the accelerator of energy are doing. They are trying to provide user-centric solutions, and the only way to get money is via scaling, and they can only scale if they have enough demand for it. So maybe look at the batches you're having, or the ones at Climate Kick or Kick Inno Energy. All of them are also judged by the jury if they are actually providing solutions for single persons and for,
Well, let me add to that. If you want to change something, there's usually a lot of people who like the idea, but there's always somebody who's really pissed. And I, in my job, usually have to deal with people that are pissed. While startups are liked by everybody. No, that's unfair, but that's okay. Well, of course, if you have a startup and you grow and other companies have declining, selling less because you sell more. I mean, obviously, you're in competition, but it's not that you get angry citizens at your front door like we do. And we would have had many angry citizens if we would have said right away, well, we need to protect the climate, you have to drive less car. Now, I say that, but usually politicians don't do that. But what we do in Berlin is, we say, hey, everybody likes bikes, right? Even people who drive cars have bikes. Everybody likes bikes, and that's why we're building more bicycle lanes. Not fast enough, but we're starting with it. And so we're getting around these pissed people by saying something which everybody likes. Now, they're starting to wake up, all those car drivers right now, and they're getting louder, unfortunately. We're trying to be faster. So for us, for me in politics, it's more like getting around or tricking those people who are against it, because there's always somebody against. And with startups, it's just so much easier. I find that unfair.
So is we're going to have a very last, very big question?
Well, I actually have like another answer, like in addition to the answer, a short request and then a final question. I hope that's okay.
All right.
Thanks a lot, I'll be quick. Oliver, I'm working for an NGO that's promoting a national levy on carbon, and I want to get back to the question about how to change people's behavior. And I find it super important that we have like initial companies, people that have great ideas, but without trying to be too pessimistic, I'm pretty sure that if you want to change people's behavior, you have to change the policy framework, and basically you have to change how much they pay. This is why we think you have to put a levy, you have to charge people for destroying the climate, and then like fossil fuels and other things that will destroy the climate simply will become more expensive, and then everything that you do, all this really new good ideas will simply be better and at the end cheaper, and I'm sure this is how like you can basically change people. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Now we have a request.
Yeah, so my name is Andrea. I'm a student also from Guatemala actually, and I funded an NGO at the TU Berlin, and we have a problem with the electricity market actually, because the problem is public buildings and entities that require a lot of energy and could also use all the buildings, the rooftops for PV, for example, systems. They have a very low price for the electricity from, I don't know, some specific contract with Vattenfall, for example, where they get like really below the normal price, and then it's really not sustainable for us to implement those systems when we don't get anything. You know, in the end, we eventually will go actually to a minus if that doesn't change, especially if the EEG-Umlage is like not changing also, or rather getting more expensive for us. So that's one request. Yeah.
So what's the request? Make electricity more expensive?
No, yes. No, yes, privileged contracts for public buildings.
Hi, Carsten is my name. British dude, check out the European Citizens Initiative. It's pretty cool. For what, European Citizens Initiative. check it out. It's pretty cool. And then I really like what he touched on, because that's what I wanted to say as well. As nobody's talked about measurement, right? Nobody's talked about what you talked about. The private sector, they care about money. If you don't measure your profits in a different way, they're never going to care. They're never going to change what they do, because they're fine where they are. So you need to actually think about policies to implement, to change the way we measure. This beer, why has it got hops from the US? And why does it cost the same as a beer that has hops from here? That shouldn't be the case, right? It just shouldn't be the case. It doesn't make sense. Everybody knows here the equation doesn't make sense. So that's a policy that we need. The whole world needs it. It has to change. Yeah, we can't keep going the way we are. So nobody talked about it here. If you guys have any ideas, I would love to hear them. But you know, the issue was just touched on. Nobody's like talking about it.
Yeah, just a very personal comment. I was studying business, and like the thing obviously you learn as business, if you want to have a company, profit counts. And maybe that's also like not the only criteria that you should aim at in future. Any more comments?
I don't know. Did you want to wrap up now, or
just a quick comment if you want, and then we wrap up.
okay? Then maybe, because it's absolutely true that we didn't really discuss the last point so much during the panel. And one thing just maybe to leave for your information to look at afterwards is that I was looking recently at business platforms, especially because of this question of how do we get business more involved in this thinking of how to improve sustainability issues. And in the case, since I focus so much on agriculture and the way the food is produced, and you mentioned also the beer example, which is very relevant to all of us here in Berlin, then there has been already a movement, for example, for the last probably 10 years of making sustainability a business case. And there's a lot of numbers out there on how many billions of dollars of improvement or of profit lay there, especially for the food producing industries, if they were to change to more sustainable practices. So there is, let's say, information on how to make that. Whether it's systematically implemented by the companies is a different question, and whether they get enough feedback from the civil society or from actors to make sure that they are accountable for the impacts of their production systems is a different one. But at least just to mention, and one that you can look at is, there's several, but then one is called FOLU Initiative, Food and Land Use Change Initiative, and has probably one of the 30 largest food retailer producers and also agriculture industries that are trying to come up with more sustainable strategies for their businesses. So I can't really say anything about how good it is yet, but let's say that there's thinking being put into that.
Yeah, I think accountability is a very important point in general for everybody. Well, thank you so much for the panel discussion. Unfortunately, your job's not done yet, but you're going to be the jury for the startup pitches that we're going to have right now. We already have some presents for you, although it's not finished yet, but because later we'll have the prizes for the startups, so that would be too much of a mess probably. So you're just going to get a bio wine from us for your participation tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, nice to just, are we going to have a little break, or maybe you take over, maybe you take your chairs down to sit in the first row? And then
Let's have a 5 minutes break, because I guess you want to drink something, you want to move, it's really cold, talk with your neighbor, it will be back in 5 minutes. And then the people presenting can just come here to me.